Hi. Hi, all. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is absolutely gorgeous outside, so I really do appreciate you sitting inside to join us for this event. Anna Dowdal is here with us. Hi, Anna. She is going to read from April on Paris Street, which is her third novel and the first published by Guernica Editions. I'm so excited to hear an excerpt from this novel that I have been immersed in the last couple of weeks. But before we get started, I'm going to share an acknowledgement of land, and then we'll dive right in. Junction Reads exists in Tekaronto, which for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Wendat Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and most recently the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. I am specifically in Adubagok, which is the place of the alders in the Michisagi language. Both are still home to many Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island, and I am very grateful to have the opportunity to work in their community on their territory. Anna Dowdal, welcome to Junction Reads.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Thank Kaylee and you, Allison, and also all the other people who are who showed up on this beautiful, if it's like Montreal weather, like exquisite Sunday evening where I probably interrupted your sangria plans or something. But soon you will be allowed to return.
Sitting in the backyard, drinking white wine cocktails.
Something like that.
I am really excited to talk about April on Paris Street and your previous two novels and the evolution of this incredible character, Ashley Smeeton. But before we do that, I would love for you to talk about what you're reading right now and give us some ideas on what we could read next.
Okay, so what I'm actually reading right now isn't a new book at all. I think it was written about 20 years ago, and it's not even fiction either. And I'll let you know a little guilty secret. The more fiction I write, the less I read for reasons one day will be clear to me. But this is a book by P.D. James. I think most of you know her, and it's called Time to Be in Earnest. And it's, I guess, for want of a better word, it's an autobiography, and it came sort of under my hand by accident. And it was a wonderful read, actually. It was she wasn't a young woman when she wrote it. She was well on. I think she was 77, and she was at the peak of her fame. And and it's kind of like she calls it a fragment. It's kind of like a mixture of like a year in the life of, and then a retrospective of her life. So it's just absolutely chock full of like fascinating things, because even at the age of 77, she went all around the world promoting her books and promoting causes and that too. And then interspersed, and then hanging out with her friend Ruth, her friend who's the other Baroness, that's Ruth Rendell. but she writes all this in such a down-to-earth way. Like there's not a like a tiny tone of snobism about the way she writes. And then really interesting to hear about her early life. She was barely, like from a lower middle class background, just barely. She was a civil servant all her life. Her husband was a doctor in World War II and came back with really severe mental health problems. So she looked after him until she couldn't anymore and worked, full time, until she retired. I mean, she really downplays that, but you can see that. I don't know, it was just an extraordinary woman who did that and then wrote all of these like amazing books.
Yeah.
She also writes about her creative process, and that's really interesting to sort of like realize how she gets ideas for her books. And anyway, it's a lovely book, and I recommend it. And my favorite, I've probably read most of her mysteries. My favorite one is Devices and Desires. Like a lot of people, that's their favorite. And she talks about the moment where she realized she was going to write it, and she was like going for a walk, I think, like on the edge of the sea, and she looked out and she saw the looming in the distance there, the nuclear power facility that I guess makes electricity. I didn't know England actually had a nuclear power.
Yeah, there's nuclear all over England.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Anyway, and then she had kind of a moment, which was hard to put into words, but she realized that somehow this was going to be the centerpiece of Devices and Desires. She didn't know anything about plot or character or anything, but that moment was, like somehow that was going to be the emblem of this new book. So anyway, it's a great book. I'd highly recommend it. I also recommend Devices and Desires if you haven't read
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I was thinking months ago about getting into more autobiographies of creative people, mainly just because the influence, not the influence, the I guess it is influence or something to spur me on, like to get ideas on how creative people lived and worked and got stuff done. So
I think it's a great idea. Another book I read recently was Stephen Spender's autobiography, and he has a reputation of being a really difficult poet, and something, he is a really difficult poet. But the autobiography was absolutely marvelous, and he lived during the time of W.H. Auden and knew all of these people, and anyway, it was marvelous. Anyway, I agree, and I think it would be quite inspirational. And when you read someone like P.D. James being so humble about what she produced, of course, that's a little bit that's kind of overwhelming in another way, of course.
Yeah.
But it anyway, it made her very, very human, and then when they talk about things like their books and the act of writing, it just, I don't know, it maybe makes us see ourselves, at least engaged in the same endeavor as them.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing. As I've said, again, I am so happy, excited to hear you read from April on Paris Street. But before I do that, I am going to share your biography, if that's okay.
Of course.
Anna Dowdal was born in Montreal and has lived across Canada and the US, working as a nurse's aide, a graphic artist, a journalist, a college instructor, a pilot, and a government employee. She is the author of 2 unpublished, but very close to award-winning young adult fantasy novels. And I love this. After an agent told her words were too big, she pointed her pen to adult fiction. Her previous novels include After the Winter and The Au Pair, both of which include a younger version of Ashley Smeeton, who's the private investigator at the core of April on Paris Street. Anna lives in Montreal. Thank you again. And would you read for us?
Yes, I will. Okay. So this is my book, April on Paris Street. And it's 320 pages of intricate plotting. So I started thinking, like, what part could I read and would it make sense? And the answer was no part. So what I'm actually going to read, I'm going to read 2 pieces. I'm going to read a prologue, which is meant to set the scene and to kind of create a certain mood that I try to carry on throughout the book. And then I'll read another sort of piece, which is a kind of the emblematic piece in the middle of the book. So this is a book among, I mean, I call it a literary mystery, and I'm not sure, people have different views of what that even means, but I play a lot with doubles, duplicates, replicates, mutations, mirroring, splitting, and all of that, and in sort of like a compendium. I'm not quite sure the effect I produced by gathering all of these together, but I did anyway. I was just playing with the form. A tale of 2 cities is way. I play. It's Paris and Montreal, so there's sort of direct and indirect allusions also to 2 solitudes, and a little bit of intertextuality. And anyway, I enjoyed it, even though nobody got it. So I have to create a lot of mood. And I'm one of these people who's really a little bit obsessed with setting anyway. So what you'll see in this first little couple of page prologue here is my effort to kind of draw out some of those themes of doubling right away, and then create a kind of slightly dreamy mood that is the context for that sort of uncertainty that doubling always produces in a book. So, all right. For a dark day in late October, Ashley admitted Point St. Charles was satisfactorily eerie. Hemmed in by elevated expressways, obsolete canals, and the St. Lawrence, bisected by tracks and maintenance yards, the Point was a silent maze of streets. Little of its ancient New France past survived. The factory shells, workers' cottages, and 2-story flats were from the 19th century. And still time kept pace with the river, bringing gentrification and its discontents. Ashley couldn't help but admire the bijou renovations with their lilac paint and curated jack-o'-lanterns. At the moment, though, she was preoccupied with rents. Unless you counted oxidizing aluminum windows or a faux stone front circa 1960, modest Rue de Paris had resisted gentrification. Stoops sagged, the municipal plantings were stunted, and iron stairs squeezed up against the narrow sidewalk. In the blurred atmosphere and dim light, the street had a charm of its own. In the 5 minutes during which Ashley had been cooling her heels on the pavement, the only sign of life was an old man cycling by on a one-speed delivery bicycle. Aram, when he emerged from the house next door, looked about 20. A community college student, he explained he'd been asked by his working parents to show Ashley the logement à louer. It was a great flat, he said. They painted it, put in new copper wiring, and with the owners next door, she wouldn't want for anything. It had been vacant for a few months, he conceded, leading her up the circular stair to the second floor. It was just that the layout didn't work for everyone. When she was through the front door, Ashley could see why. You stepped into either a too large foyer or an inadequately private living room, but the visibility was just right for an office. Its 2 tall windows struck a refined yet businesslike note, and there was plenty of room for her needs. Drafty in Montreal's brutal winters, all the better to send clients promptly on their way. Aram led her across the passage to an elongated boxcar room. If you ever need a secret way into the kitchen, he said, opening a 2-foot wide wallpaper door in a corner. Ashley laughed. That's handy. The appeal of the sly second exit was undeniable. Another tall window here overlooked the street. The narrowness made this room snug, den-like, something she liked in a living room. The kitchen and bathroom were roomy, old-fashioned. The main bedroom, which took up the back width of the flat, was another pleasant surprise. It had its own balcony, as Perez had said when he told her about this rental, with another iron staircase leading down. A weed tree's yellowing canopy leaned near, and the spiral stair seemed to descend into the heart of the tree. It was like being in a tree house. They talked terms. There was dedicated parking out back for her Crown Victoria Interceptor, and the subway was close. The rent Aram mentioned hadn't unduly shocked. Its potential was obvious. Honestly, why hesitate? She wandered back to the bedroom, Aram in tow. For the briefest moment, she imagined herself and John. Sometimes she remembered him that way, sometimes as the Perez guy, entwined on a king mattress on the floor, perhaps looking out over the moving leaves that gave the room its fitful ochre light. John Perez. She'd met him last summer during that strange job in the Laurentians. That's book 2. She hadn't seen him since, and she didn't expect to. He was probably back in Colombia now, but Ashley had no regrets. It was what people more romantically versed than her, more in the know, called an interlude. That he'd mentioned this vacant flat in a stray comment about shacking up was neither here nor there. Pure coincidence to find herself here now that she needed new digs. She and Aram chit-chatted some more. He liked computers, but was studying political science to the despair of his parents, who didn't think this was practical. He was enthralled when she offered her card. Ashley Arabella Smeeton, licensed private investigator. This was a career he'd never thought of. Maybe he should. They agreed, all smiles, that renting the apartment looked promising. She would ring this evening. While they'd been inside, the weather had changed. The wind had risen abruptly and the sky was now stormy. How did you hear about the rental? Aram zipped his hoodie as he followed Ashley down the winding stair. A fierce gust loosed volleys of dead leaves along the street and threw dust and grit into Ashley's eyes. Her good mood sagged a little. Oh, I saw the ad, she said. Rue de Paris. I wonder how it got its name. Aram said he didn't have a clue. Maybe it pointed towards Paris. For himself, he'd never been out of Canada. Have you ever been to Paris? He inquired. Never, no. Ashley pursued the departing dust devil with frowning gaze. Now she felt only restlessness. Perhaps she thought the time had come to do something about that. So that's my prologue, and then I get into the story, which is the story of she finds a client who wants her to go to Paris. So she goes on this very rich client's dime to Paris and has a series of adventures with the client's wife, Mirabel, who's a very important other character in the book and who for some reason won't come home. So now I am going to move forward to a kind of Hitchcockian set piece that I read at another Zoom event a while ago. Again, it's to sort of get away from like giving you a little slice of the plot that you won't get. So, and this was, I mentioned earlier that that moment where P.D. James saw the power station, the nuclear power station, and that was the book, but you didn't know what the rest of the book was going to be. Well, I had this picture of myself, I had this picture of Ashley kind of quite at sea, because she has working class rural Quebec background, so she's not the kind of person who goes to Paris. And but finding herself in a part, she finds Paris strange to begin with, finding herself in a part of Paris that she's never been in before, doesn't know how she got there. It's very strange. And then having this bizarre kind of doppelganger moment, not where she's herself coming towards her, but where she actually sees Mirabel coming towards her, but Mirabel cannot, and looks very different and cannot be there. And I thought that's like something out of, not Rear Window, what's the other one? The one with Kim Novak and James Stewart, the one,
Vertigo?
What is it?
Vertigo?
Vertigo, thank you. God, how can I forget a title like that? Anyway, so you'll see my effort. And that was, I had a picture of this. I had a picture of her being essentially freaked out because she doesn't understand what she's seeing. And then I somehow wanted to put a whole story around that. So now I'm going to read you that. I've lost my place, so you excuse me for a moment here. Oh, yes, okay. So I'm going to skip a little part that I was going to read, because I think I'm kind of being a bit long-winded here, where she has a kind of she's in Paris during Carnival, and she has a kind of unpleasant experience with a man. Then she finds herself going into a part of the city, but that's unsettled her. It's rattled her. So then, but that was to set up for this other more unsettling experience that comes. So I'm just going to get into that part right away now. This experience set Ashley to walking again. That was the unsettling experience with the man in the mask. Without thinking about it, she headed in an easterly direction, away from the winter tourists and shishi shoppers. Soon she entered another type of district. It had the omnipresent 5- and 6-story Second Empire buildings, here interspersed with different ones of ochre brick with striking dark red accents. She could have been in some European mystery city. There were small, unassuming parks, and the shops were of the kind the lower middle class everywhere frequented. Modest chains, local businesses, and neighborhood restaurants. This must be where the average Parisian lived, if there was such a thing. The streets were narrow, but sidewalks were moderately busy, with neatly dressed women carrying shopping bags, delivery men darting in and out of buildings, the odd lycée student or flaneur. She had no idea where she was. Under a bright sun, the area might have felt different, but the iron gray day had robbed the quiet scene of any low-key charm it might have possessed. It was not without its own mood, however. In the thick, cold air, the edges of things were slightly blurred, and this gave the streets a dreamlike feel. Were they getting near the Seine, she wondered. It looked like mist, but mist on so cold a day? A single large snowflake pirouetted lazily before her eyes. She had come to a building on the far side of the street, whose Art Deco doors framed in pale green tile were like nothing else in the neighborhood. A woman was exiting just then, a chic woman in a deep red coat that leapt out against the tile background. As she continued to look, a dreadful coldness seized Ashley's heart. She recognized the woman, far from Les Halles and looking unlike herself, yet unmistakable. Mirabel Saint Cyr was tripping along the sidewalk, her ankle boots making a tap-tapping sound on the pavement. Ashley stared open-mouthed. The street, Rue des Capucins, was especially narrow here, and she could see Mirabel clearly in every detail. The coat was the belted style and the collar was up. On her coiffed fair hair, a pale green velvet cap was tilted at an angle. It had a veil that dropped down over the top part of Mirabel's face, until Ashley realized she was in fact looking at clever carnaval makeup to resemble a lace veil. Mirabel looked like she'd stepped out of some old movie, but as she stopped with a familiar look of mild annoyance to adjust one two-tone boot, she fairly burned with three-dimensional life. Ashley was paralyzed. What on earth would Mirabel be doing here? She had just exited this anonymous apartment building. What business could she possibly have in this neighborhood? But even more disturbing, how could Mirabel even be here? It made no sense. It was, in fact, impossible. Mirabel had just texted Ashley, saying she and Mireille were at Les Halles, staked out at a coffee shop at a bookstore. She even named it Au Bonheur des Livres, and awaiting Raymond. Mirabel, Ashley yelled as loudly as she could. Across the street, the woman turned and gave Ashley an empty look. If this was Mirabel Saint Cyr, then it was Mirabel in a trance or a dream. The gaze was that of an indifferent stranger passing over Ashley. She took a step off the sidewalk and provoked a blare of sound from an oncoming delivery truck. It swept by inches away amid gesticulations of the driver and was followed immediately by another truck that hit the brakes with massive inconvenience right in front of her. Ashley could now see nothing. She ran along the sidewalk as the truck aggravatingly kept pace, and it was long moments before her view cleared. She was just able to catch sight of the flame-bright coat, the little bobbing hat, disappearing around a corner. Provoking more driver ire, she dodged among cars. How had the traffic become so busy? And made it to the other sidewalk. She raced to the corner and looked down Rue de la Charrette, one of those dim alley-like side streets where Mirabel had turned. The air was filled suddenly with snow. In the white blur of tumbling snowflakes, there wasn't a soul to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wish that everyone could have heard the scene with her and the guy in the mask, because that was grotesque.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
that was the one that. Sorry about that. I just felt I was taking too long.
No, it's not. You can take as much time as you want. The reading is the most important part of this event.
But like, I'm glad you mentioned it though, because one of the themes of the book, if it has a theme, like literary crime fiction kind of like sits half and half with themes and half with storytelling, is really about masks behind masks. So what he does, where he has a mask that's horrible enough, then he takes it off, and Ashley is like terrified by what she sees underneath, and then she realizes belatedly it's another mask that's meant also to be emblematic, and it's supposed to freak her out so much that when she sees Mirabel, or this Mirabel
look-alike,
walking by and then looking through her in that dead way, that's meant to be really mess with her.
Yeah. And it's funny, you talked about the doubles that perhaps people missed. And I think the literary doubling I probably didn't get, but what I did get, and the guy in the two masks was one of them, was the characters who are not just one, but potentially two people. And the fashion counterfeit also being one thing, but also being another. I picked up on, and Thug 1 and Thug 2, and it's like all of these characters come in twos, right? Even
and two cities.
Yeah, and even her father, who's no longer here, and then we've got the uncle. So I wanted to talk to you about that kind of that doubling of people. You can feel free to talk about the literary doubling that you spoke about earlier as thematically, but I was most interested in the characters and how that potential duplicity created so much more tension in the story.
Right. Well, I mean, crime fiction is perfect for that kind of play of doubles, isn't it? Because it's always, you know, the way in which crime fiction proceeds, it's the writer deliberately holds back certain things, so puts forward things that aren't true, but then like throws in some little hints there, but then like, you know, drags a red herring across the trail to distract you and so on. So there's a lot of like of showing and then distracting, you know, from, you know, so 10, you know, so it's so like, and all characters, or not all characters, but key characters in crime fiction are double. You know, there's the person you see through the first maybe 300 pages, and then there's the person that is revealed at the end, if it follows that kind of crime, you know, that kind of plot. But I definitely did it in terms of that bigger interest in, and you know, I don't know, it's like writers get interested in weird things, and you know, when you talked about the characters, that's probably the most important part of it, you know. But I was really interested in things like, oh, I've got two cities going on, and I'm going to have like plot repetition a little bit in the one and the other, and then I'm also going to have, this was like to amuse myself probably, like anybody who knows Montreal at all knows that, you know, it's divided into two, you know, the western half is English and the eastern half, where I live, is French. And then when Ashley goes to the East End and has a, you know, has a kind of experience that she can't interpret, you know, like I was playing with every single possible like version, you know, like she herself is double, you know, like she has a background that is, you know, she's part indigenous in her background, but she's never known her father. And I would have kept that, you know, as something in detail in the background, but like a reviewer of my second book said, you know, I really want some backstory for Ashley. So I felt I was in the corner, so I better give her a backstory. But then I thought it works, you know, with the English, with the cultural, like distinct, you know, yeah, the what's the word I'm looking for now? The, you know, the fractures, you know, the cultural fractures. Everything is double, you know. So it's this, we're all psychologically double in a way. You know, we've got, you know, contradictory impulses, we've got light and dark in us. But, you know, and I said, oh, I'm gonna see if I can pile on cultural, linguistic, you know, just everything, and just sort of, I don't know, see what I'm still waiting for somebody to tell me what I did. But to go back to your original question, it works very well with crime fiction to create uncertainty and that sense of, without like trying to, I won't try to write like violent or very suspenseful books, but still you create a tension when like you have a sense always that like you don't quite know what's going on, and characters aren't quite what you think they might be at any one time. So anyway, so I mean, its primary manifestation is probably in character, and a lot of critics actually have commented on you know, they said the plot is like kind of the background, and what she likes to do is just really depict characters. I suppose that's true.
Yeah. Well, that was part of it. Was honestly the section of the book where you mentioned the Orient Express. You actually mentioned Agatha Christie, and I thought, yes, a 1000%. I felt like this cast of duplicitous characters, and, you know, women who some characters think are weak, but in fact are not weak, and control.
That's nicely put. Yeah.
I thought throughout the whole thing, because it's you know, at one point I thought, Madge, who's Madge again? I had to go back and read her introduction.
Right.
And that's the challenge for readers. If you go from reading a few books that aren't crime novels and getting into it, you almost have to remind yourself of that potential for duplicity.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about her. That's right. She's another one. She writes. She's a
Eleanor. What's the character's name?
Yeah, something. La Flamme, Esmeralda La Flamme. That's right. Under a pseudonym, she writes potboilers, but she's actually a Cégep teacher who actually writes poetry, difficult, sovereignist, non-rhyming poetry. But then she has an alter ego as Esmeralda La Flamme.
It's so fantastic. Yeah. Before I continue with my questions, I always forget. I'm so sorry. Anybody, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or if you want to direct it to Kaylee specifically, she'll ask on your behalf towards the end. So speaking of Agatha Christie, I was thinking about literary influence, and you talked about P.D. James at the beginning, and that interests me in thinking about what you're reading as you sit down to write Ashley as a character.
So Ashley started out as in my first book as
Young
as
girl.
a sort of important secondary character, like a kind of an odd little girl of 9 who the protagonist meets. I wanted her. My first novel is actually romantic suspense, but it's kind of ironic romantic suspense. I wanted to play with the conventions there, and then I wanted this little antidote girl, who's kind of like cynical and odd, and has a Nancy Drew complex, so that helps with the mystery plot. And she kind of took over like part of my brain, and I have had readers of my first book say, "Oh, but Ashley Smeeton," and they want to talk about Ashley Smeeton, who was not supposed to be that important of a character, right? But some people say, "Oh, she's such a little like dynamo in the story," and some people say, "Oh, she's so touching," and okay, right? Anyway, she took over. She kind of colonized my brain. And when I was having a conversation with my editor, this was a different publisher, and she said, "But you're not going to make this a series, are you?" And like they want you to make, they like series.
Yeah.
I said, thinking like the spur of the moment, I said, "Oh yes, I am." I said, because Ashley's going to grow up and she's going to become a private eye. And I thought, where did that come from?
Oh, you actually said that to the publisher. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah.
And as soon as like it was in my head, you never know. Writers never know. Like people ask me, where do I get my ideas? How the hell do I know? They just are in my head. They weren't before. So it was kind of like one of those moments where Ashley, suddenly it was going to be obvious she was going to be grown up and be a private eye. So the second book, and then this one, the third. So she kind of took over, and she had a kind of life of her own. And then so when I had, I'm a real believer in own voice, but at the same time, my books are going to have people from like a variety of different backgrounds, right? So I take a character like her, who's got, who's got half indigenous, and then you kind of move her to a central character. You sort of, you ask yourself at some point, like what exactly you're doing there. And with the second book, I kind of ducked that a little bit. And I just said, I'll put her in a situation with a wealthy Jewish family, and, there'll be ethnicity. There just won't be hers,
Yeah.
But anyway, like I said, that critic said, but like, I want to hear about Ashley's backstory. So then I thought, okay, I guess the third book will be the one in which I will attempt to plumb that a little bit. And then I thought it also worked very well with the theme of doubles, you see, because she herself is divided in a variety of different ways. The world of the novel is represented as also divided and fragmented. So I thought it worked very well. But anyway, that's Ashley. She kind of took over,
And it does the introduction of Antoinette and her uncle and members of the family. It works in thinking as a reader about a fourth novel, because I did feel like I needed more. I needed more of that emotional split that she was feeling. But then about halfway through, I thought, oh no, this is perfect, because now Antoinette is here, and they're going to, their relationship is going to develop and move, and Ashley's going to grow or discover that side of herself. So it worked. It worked for me in that respect.
Oh, well, I'm really glad you said that. I mean, certainly my readers have had different reactions to it. And like, so for example, somebody who I met at my launch who had actually read my book. So, I was not to complain when somebody shows up at your launch having read your book, but said they thought that whole family story kind of, like they didn't like it as much. They thought it just slowed down the suspense. So I'm glad you said that, Allison.
Yeah, well, for me, I am a lover of backstory. I like I like knowing that a character exists outside of what's happening in the novel. And that's why, I can't even remember when this was introduced, maybe halfway, 3/4 through. That's why I loved when you introduced the other cases that she was working on.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because in, novels where a private investigator is at the heart of the story, sometimes you're just moving in that, you're on that trajectory, right? Like the planet trajectory in this one storyline. But in the novel, you actually talk about 2 other cases that she's working on.
I'm so glad you brought those up too, because I very deliberately did that, because as you probably noticed, they kind of mirror the main themes and foreshadow a little bit. And yes, certainly they slow down and densify the narrative. But that wasn't my purpose to, I wasn't writing James Patterson, right?
Yeah.
So, and particularly the one where the
husband's
that's the double life, in the East End, in the mythic East End, where nobody goes. So that was my purpose there. And I thought, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. If I really want to kind of explore absolutely every ramification of doubling, well, I'll give her these these cases, and I'll arrange them like a motif on a tapestry to reflect on the main part. And I guess it slowed everything down. That was this guy's point, I guess.
But also in how it served me as a reader, because I am a big fan of reading books and being left with something to think about and something to kind of finish myself and write myself. I felt like one of those, I think it was Sarah and Kevin. This is the double, the guy living the double life.
Right.
There isn't really an answer to whether the other person he's with, Guylain, is actually his wife. Like it isn't really clear that they're living. So I love that. And I love the potential that there's this other world of characters living outside of the book. So great job. Great job.
And then is the other one are you talking about that that girl who's a friend of the neighbors who goes missing? Is that the one you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the they're not, it's a couple. I think it's Sarah and Kevin are their names. They're not married.
Right. Oh yeah, them. But you said that there were 2 kind of cases. So what was the other case?
It was later. It came after the Sarah and Kevin one.
Was that the girl, the young woman that went missing?
I thought it had something to do with Roy and Lucy.
Oh yeah, there's Roy and Lucy. They have their own story, but then there's also Chantal, the neighbor, remember, and her kind of bruisey boyfriend.
Yes.
Yeah, who could have been, a menace. And then there's a little bit of irony there about, Ashley's ability to discriminate between her awful boyfriend and this guy that she was sure was awful, right? But who turned out was a straight arrow. But there's also, remember, that friend of Chantal's who goes missing. And at the very end of the book, they're sitting in Ashley's kitchen and saying, and she disappeared one day. So you have this idea of another case, but you're right, not nothing clear cut, nothing resolved, just, mysteries going by. That sort of, you get glimpses of that thematically reinforce that sense of a mutating, uncertain world that Ashley finds herself in.
Yeah, it was great. And you talked about setting and your love of setting, and that was one of the most impressive things as a writer reading a writer. You do such an incredibly good job with the like sensuality of space, of the place where she is, Paris, and the carnival and the masquerade parties, and everything. Just, you can feel the darkness and the coldness and the snow and all of that kind of stuff. I wanted to talk to you about that in how it is developed with, and I'm assuming that you haven't lived in Paris.
No, I've never lived
you haven't
in Paris.
But
I've stayed in dumpy hotels and been in some of those neighborhoods for sure.
I wanted to talk to you about how is it just like a natural thing? It just comes to you. You write, and the space.
Yes. In fact, I was asked by Canadian Notes and Queries to write an article for a crime fiction special, and I was given no time to do it. And I said, I'll write about setting because like there's other, Canadian crime fiction writers are interested in setting too. So it was a chance for me to really think about my own use of setting. But I remember Caitlin Galway saying, who wrote Bonavere House, she's actually a co-writer of mine at Guernica, saying, like, she also writes a very, very, atmospheric, moody books, invests heavily in setting. And she said, I thought she said, one of the things she said was quite interesting. She said, like, it's not, there's nothing deliberate about it. It's just, this is, this, when I start to write, this is what I create. This is the world I create. My world making means I've created like an atmospheric dense space for me and my characters to move through. And that, basically describes, my approach to setting. Who knows why, I also joke that, we have a lot of setting in Canada, and Margaret Atwood. Yeah, I actually quoted her too in that article. Margaret Atwood said in, I think, Survival, she said in Canadian literature, I'm not going to get this exactly right. She said, everything is the dark background, is what she says. And then she goes to talk about Canada, and then she talks about setting. The whole damn book, is about setting. And anyway, so, I say to myself as a Canadian, there's so much setting in our world, and whether it's the unknown mean streets of a city in a crime fiction, or even, like Iona Whishaw writes wonderful rural crime fiction where, the forest is, can suck you, like suck the life out of you, and it creates a mood and a menace. So there's a lot of Canadian crime fiction writers who are in love with setting, and they don't just do it in a generic kind of way. They do it in a regional way, the like Quebec writers writing in French, because I'm bilingual, I read a lot of French books. It's amazing how beautifully they create, a kind of a menacing world, sometimes country, sometimes city, that then kind of, interacts with the characters and creates, mood, and also creates like destiny too, like take Anne Lambert. I don't know if you ever read Anne Lambert's Dogs of Winter. She's a Montreal playwright, and she published this, I think, a few years ago with I'm gonna say Second Story Press, I think. You should have Anne Lambert on your show. She's great. But anyway, she, like in her, like the opening scene is like somebody driving in Montreal during a snowstorm and like goes over a bump, but's not sure, they've gone over what they've gone over. It turns out it's the body of an indigenous woman who's dead and then hidden under the snow. And so in that case, then the city becomes kind of an emblem or symbol of, I guess, how we have mistreated indigenous people, and collectively, like how we continue to do harm. And so you can, so it's not just that it's looming and interesting and in that regard, like very useful for crime fiction, right? But it's also, you can yoke it to various themes and social social considerations, psychological considerations. Fabulous. Why am I? You asked me about me. I'm going to one other. No, that's fine. One other. He's a French polar writer, a detective writer called Jacques Coutet, and he puts a lot of his stories in the black fly, haunted Quebec bush, and it was anything more claustrophobic and terrifying than some of his stories, But it's very consciously done to increase the mood. So, nice. Setting, I love it.
Yeah, well, and that I loved the Prizan Carnival, and also thinking about our own Carnival. But what have you been to Carnival? Like, did you just research it and get as much detail?
I researched it. Actually, I went to Paris for a few days and researched it. And there was I went to the national to the Parisian archives up in the Marais, and they were at one of those smaller museums. They had a they had a special exhibit on Le Carnaval, which gave me the idea for Ashley going to the museum and finding herself confused between the plague exhibit and the Carnaval exhibit, because everything is crazy in both of them. And but definitely, but a lot of it was just, and then I read books about it, but a lot of it was just my imagination. I thought, I didn't really get into Bakhtin, the Russian critics' idea of the carnivalesque as the kind of the reversal of everything that is normal and everyday, and reversal of power structure. It was more just, Carnaval, it'll be splashy and colorful and thrilling. And I'm trying to write kind of at least, hybrid popular literary fiction. So I want that, but also it lends itself to the kinds of themes of uncertainty and masks and so on that I want to, that I knew I'd be exploiting. So anyway.
Nice.
Yeah. But then this friend of mine from university told me when she was reading my book, she's now teaches at UCLA actually, and she said, when we were in graduate school together, Anna, you always loved masks. And I'm going, what are you talking about? I don't remember. You were fascinated with masks. She told me you were obsessed with masks. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I don't remember.
That's so funny.
I know.
That's like in your subconscious that's
right.
Incredible. I just have one more question, Kaylee. I'm sorry, and we'll open it up to people. I wanted to talk about Ashley's family and what you're writing next, and hopefully maybe getting into that family and the Abenaki culture and what if any is that, how's that going to play in the next?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because after writing my third book, I decided to set Ashley Smeeton aside. And my fourth book, currently out looking for a publisher, is a completely different book. It's also a literary mystery. It's set in the early 60s. I guess you could call it, it has an amateur sleuth. There's a lot of dark humor in it. I like as each book, my humor has become more and more pronounced. So there's an element of fable about this, and magic realism, and an element of nice. Probably farce as well. But the protagonist is this 29-year-old nun who means well. And finds herself teaching at this very posh girls' school where the girls start to disappear. She herself has her own problems. This is where the dark humor comes in. She had a bad case of agnosticism verging on atheism. So it's, oh, well, jobs are hard to come by, so I'll hang out the year and hope for the best. So she finds herself in situations that are anyway, she meaning well, she gets herself into all
spiritually
kinds of
challenging.
That's right. And it's a story both about this school. It's kind of like a city meets school story, because there's also a whole other kind of social plot of this little post-war small city that's too big for its boots and wants to build the biggest bridge in the world, and does so, but it doesn't end well for the bridge or the city. And so I yoke these two together. So there's no resemblance to anything I've written, other than you would probably, if you read it, sort of see the kind of the trademark kind of writing style and probably in some ways, the way Ashley's about sort of an ingenue, finds herself in these situations and goes, what? And then does the best that she can. So Sister Harriet in this book is the same, only she takes more risks than Ashley, and she's more she gets into things more than her. But then there's that humor and that nice. Kind of, like I sympathize with my characters, but I make fun of them at the same time. And I sympathize with them again, and then the humor gets a bit darker, and then I sympathize with them again. And anyway, so it's out there.
If you're not doing it as a writer, the readers are going to do it anyway. So that's great.
So I have no idea what the interest of this book is, but I keep my fingers crossed.
Yes, we will keep our fingers crossed too.
Thank you.
Kaylee, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have a question from Marcia, and Marcia asks, having woven your own mystery, are you able to watch mystery films or read mysteries and enjoy them without working to unravel them as you digest?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, any writer, always looks at, things on TV and books that they read, with a certain professional eye. You're sort of going, oh, look what they did there. That's rather good. Or, oh, I wouldn't have done that. Or, so, but it doesn't affect your ability, your enjoyment of them. Acorn had recently, I think one season anyway, of an early Adam Dalgliesh. They created a very, I forget one. It's the one that's set in the hospital or the nurses' sort of residence or something. And I was just blown away by it. And while I was simultaneously kind of going, oh, so that's how they interpreted the book. So that's how they did it. Oh, I like what they did with the mood here. I was just totally enjoying it. I said at the beginning, I read less, like a good deal less fiction than I used to, but I could probably like start to recite Agatha Christie novels, certain ones of them. I've read them so often, but get in bed with a clue and you don't really feel like doing anything. Of course, you're going to, read, The Secret Adversary one more time because you anticipate what Poirot was going to say, but who cares? So I guess not. I guess just it's one of those genres that to me is ever fresh.
Yeah. Well, Kaylee has read all of Agatha Christie probably a number of times.
Yeah. And, well, I stop at once.
Yeah. My big criticism with TV is the casting. For me, I'm always, if we know who the character, I know who the murderer is because you've casted a somewhat popular actor.
Yeah, that's a dead giveaway, isn't it?
Yes, and then I always feel bad for the writer because I think the writer's probably reading it or watching it going, damn it, why did you
so
have
obvious?
Yeah, but that's great. Anna, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your work. This was fantastic.
Well, thank you so much.
April on Paris Street was a joy to read. Your cast of characters is enviable. How all of them have their own lives and participate in the novel. We are going to raffle off one, or should we do two? Let's do Kaylee, what do you think? Would you do one here and then we'll do another one on social media? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's nice to keep the momentum going and get some more eyeballs on things.
Okay, so before you even do that, if you're going to do that now, I wanted to thank you both in front of everybody. I'm blown away by what Kaylee and Allison do, with Junction Reads. It's such a great venue for someone like me, but they don't just do it like as another venue, little online venue. It's just like everything about it is quality, and you feel so good when you're here. And so and your promotion was exemplary leading up to this. And anyway, it's obviously something that comes from the heart for both of you, and I'm madly impressed and very grateful.
Thank you so much, Anna. We love it. So both of us have been lifelong readers, and I mean, it's hard to imagine my life without books, talking about them and immersing myself in them. So thank you so much for saying that. Raffle.
All right. I also will say thank you, but I'm not going to be able to say anything that Allison hasn't already said. So thank you for being here and for doing that. All right, our winner for today is Kevin Wilson, who I'm
Kevin is my fellow Guernica author, so we're keeping it in the family. But it's not fixed, folks.
And Kevin is coming in 3 weeks.
Excellent.
I mean, this speaks to Kevin's in loyalty and coming to Junction Reads as often as he does. How many books have you won, Kevin?
This is the third.
Amazing. It pays off, people.
Like crime, it pays.
Yes. Thank you so much again. In a week, because we had some time off, in a week, we'll be sitting with Dorothy Palmer to talk about her improv G20 Summit funny book, Kerfuffle. And in 3 weeks, Kevin Wilson up there is coming with his novel Stan. I don't have it here to show it. Call Me Stan. I feel in my mind I'm saying it wrong, Kevin. I'm like, Call me Stan.
That's right. Call me Stan.
Call me Stan. I had we in my head, so I was like, we are, it's not that. And that will be our final reading for the season, and then we'll be off for the summer and back next year, hopefully in person. But Anna Dowdal, again, thank you for joining us today.
All right, well, thank you again, and lovely. I'm so glad the folks who called in did, and you know, maybe if someone likes like my weird fourth book, I might show up again on Junction.
Yeah,
Reads.
exactly.
Might invite me a second. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Thanks, Kaylee. Thank you.
Have a lovely Saturday night or Sunday night.
Sunday night.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a great day.